Canada's maple leaf flag celebrated its 50th birthday in 2015. One of the earliest proponents in favor of making the maple leaf the official emblem of Canada was Denny Benjamin Viger, president of the Society Saint Jean Baptiste. On June 24, 1836, in his address to the Society in Quebec, he said,
"This tree, which grows in our valleys, on our rocks, at first young and beaten by the storms, is not vigorous, feeding itself with great difficulty from the soil. But soon it grows fast, and when it's tall and strong, does not fear storms and overcomes the north wind, which is unable to shake it. The maple is the king of our forests. It is the emblem of the Canadian people."
Viger's dream would have to wait another 129 years. But finally, on February 15, 1965, Canada's new red and white maple leaf flag was officially raised on Parliament Hill. Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson's promise that Canada would have its new flag in time for the country's 100th birthday in 1967 had been fulfilled, but the road to its acceptance as a symbol of our national identity had been a bumpy one. There had been two earlier flag debates under Prime Minister Mackenzie King in 1925 and in 1945-46, both of which generated critical backlash and thereby made little headway. In the first instance, Mackenzie King capitulated under heated criticism from the Orange Order of Canada, which was strongly opposed. In the House of Commons on June 1, 1925, T.L. Church, the member for Toronto North, had posed a number of questions, among which were, quote, "Who is asking for such a Canadian flag and for such a change, and why? Is the Union Jack not Canada's only official flag? And was it not once used by the Canadian Expeditionary Forces overseas in France? Will an opportunity be given in the House to discuss such an unnecessary innovation in view of Canada having no land army and no fleet?" Mackenzie King himself responded that the flag issue was a matter for all of Parliament, that the government would not for a moment consider adopting a national flag other than by resolution of the House, and that he himself would
be proud and happy to have Canada continue in the future as in the past to have the Union Jack recognized as the national flag.
And moreover, I would not lend my support to any proposal which did not include the Union Jack. In the second instance, in 1945-46, a flag committee was formed which collected 2,700 flag designs and over 42,000 communications as submitted by interested citizens from all parts of Canada. The resulting design extracted by the committee from the surfeit of choices in 1946 was by every standard, according to Matheson, a disaster. It continued to be a corruption of the flag of British merchant service, and it appropriated gold as the color of the maple leaf for Canada, although gold or green had been assigned heretically to Ontario almost 80 years earlier. Burned twice already by the flag issue, Mackenzie King dropped it completely and refused to accept the committee's recommendations on the grounds that it was not unanimous. Two of the biggest opponents were the Royal Canadian Legion and former Prime Minister John George Diefenbaker. Both favored retention of the red ensign showing the Union Jack in the upper left and the shield from the Canadian coat of arms to the right. Originally, the ensign was authorized by the British Admiralty in 1892 for use only on Canadian ships, and 32 years later, through an order in council, it was authorized to be flown over Canadian government buildings abroad. It wasn't until 1944 that it was approved for Canadian forces overseas. In his speech to the open flag debate in the House of Commons a year earlier, Pearson had spoke of the distinctive Canadian flag that would bring all Canadians together, one that
will say proudly to the world and to the future, "I stand for Canada."
Diefenbaker responded to what he called Pearson's pennant by saying that,
"At a time when there are many other matters that ought to have received the consideration of the House, this question cannot have any other effect than to divide this nation as it has not been divided."
An editorial in the Vancouver Province of January 18, 1964, under the banner "Mr. Pearson Flirts with Political Suicide," the newspaper charged that the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize had become a contender for another distinction, that of kindling the worst racial conflict in the country's history. The Ottawa Citizen, June 5, 1964, quoted strong Diefenbaker supporter Gordon Churchill as calling the maple leaf design a monstrosity. Churchill fought in both world wars when the Union Jack and then the red ensign represented his country. It is of interest to note that of the 2,700 total, well over half of the designs included the maple leaf. Other designs included snowflakes, the northern lights, fleur-de-lis, igloos, wigwams, RCMP on horseback, lacrosse sticks, a canoe, which was a non-starter, as without a paddler aboard, it looks as if it's going in two directions at once. Also, beavers rampant under the polar star or standing upright beside a half-gnawed birch branch, combinations of these and more. Prior to Canadian Confederation, the beaver had been a serious contender as a national symbol. It was an industrious animal and was largely responsible for the early exploration of Canada during its heyday of the fur trade. It appeared on the crew of the coat of arms granted by King Charles I in 1632 to Sir William Alexander of Nova Scotia, and on the coat of arms granted to the Hudson's Bay Company by Charles II in 1670. In 1851, Sir Sandford Fleming, the father of Standard Time and builder of the Canadian Pacific Railway, designed the Dominion of Canada's 3-pence beaver postage stamp, the world's first pictorial postage stamp, all previous stamps having had human portraits if they had any image at all. His inspiration for this could have been the 1850 flag designed by the patriotic organization known as the Native Canadian Society, showing a wreath of maple leaves surrounded by a twig-chewing beaver and the motto, "Everywhere we remember the homeland." In 1965, this flag is reported to be stored at the Hastings and Prince Edward Regiment Military Museum in Belleville, but is no longer there and its whereabouts are unknown. Brigadier General Alexander Ross, who was a lieutenant colonel, commanded the 28th Northwest Battalion at Vimy Ridge in 1917, and remembered that it was
Canada, from the Atlantic to Pacific on parade. I thought then that in those few minutes I witnessed the birth of a nation.
It was on the recommendation of the Canadian government that the colors red and white were declared Canada's official colors by King George V on November 21, 1921. However, while Fleming had no quibbles about beavers on stamps, he did not recommend them for a national flag.
There are other members of the same natural order, Rodentia, such as rats and mice, not less active and industrious than the beaver, and for this quality alone, no one would dream of selecting one of these vermin for our national emblem.
In fact, he wasn't big on the maple leaf either, saying that,
"If a single green leaf be plucked, it shrivels in a few hours. In no form has the maple leafs the quality of endurance which we desire."
In September 1964, the Liberal government referred the flag debate to an all-party committee of 15 members, 7 Liberals, 5 Conservatives, 1 NDP, 1 Social Credit, and 1 Creditiste, under the chairmanship of MP Herman Batten from Corner Brook, Newfoundland. Among the host of dire predictions preliminary to the committee's formation, the previously quoted Vancouver Province reported that the Prime Minister was headed into a hurricane zone. The Winnipeg Tribune advised its readers that the PM seems intent on, quote, following courses of action that can produce only bitterness and even hatred. It would be difficult to imagine anything more divisive at this moment in Canada's history than this apparent obsession to introduce a new flag. The Toronto Telegram referred to the country's symbols as, quote, rather permanent things. It is extremely doubtful that the symbols of Canada has changed in the course of the centuries. To tamper with our traditional flag, the Canadian ensign, at this time is mischievous and dangerous. On the flip side, the Montreal Star expressed a view that Pearson's handling of the flag issue would emerge as, quote, a considerable achievement in that long after the current shouting is finished, he would be recognized as a man whose courage both settled the contentious issue and after nearly 100 years of existence finally gave a nation a flag. The Flag Committee would hold 41 meetings, peruse roughly 5,000 designs, and hear many hours of advice from experts in heraldry. The Royal Canadian Legion opposed the maple leaf and anything else that did not include the Union Jack. On Sunday, May 7, 1964, Pearson faced nearly 2,000 RCL delegates and their spouses at a meeting at the Winnipeg Capitol Theatre to address them as Prime Minister and as a veteran of the First World War on the flag issue.
When I went overseas in 1915, I had comrades in my section, men whose names were Cameron, Kimura, O'Shaughnessy, De Chapin. We didn't fall in or fall out as Irish Canadians, French Canadians, Japanese Canadians, Dutch Canadians. We wore the same uniform with the same maple leaf flag badge, and we were proud to be known as Canadians, to serve as Canadians, and to die, if it had to be, as Canadians. I believe today a flag designed around the maple leaf will be a true reflection of the new Canada.
At one point during his speech, a small group in the audience raised a red ensign on a pole and waved it in the air. A roar of approval went up from a large number of the Legionnaires. Pearson forged ahead, saying that a new flag would not mean disrespect for the Union Jack, that it would remain a symbol
of our membership in the Commonwealth of Nations.
Someone shouted, "God save Diefenbaker." Another yelled for the Prime Minister to go home. When the meeting chair tried to restore order, Pearson told him,
"It's all right, Mr. Chairman. This is a veterans meeting."
This comment brought laughter and some applause and appeared to shift the mood of the crowd. When his speech concluded, almost half the audience stood and applauded. The parliamentary debate over the new flag would consume 33 days and hear 252 speeches, many of them by the Conservative Party, as a tactic to delay the vote, when finally, and much to the disgust of Diefenbaker, the Liberal government invoked closure to end the debate. The parliamentary vote on December 15, 1964, in favor of the new flag was 163 to 78. Pearson's personal favorite, the design showing 3 red maple leaves on a white background framed on either side by blue bands representing C to C, sometimes called Pearson's pennant, did not win the day. The flag design that won the vote, taken by the committee on October 22, 1964, a flag that crowns the Parliament building today, the one our athletes and military wear, the one we sport on our lapels and wave at parades, owes its origin in part to the flag of the Royal Military College in Kingston, and somewhat ironically to a graphics designer who was a strong Quebec nationalist, Jacques Saint-Cyr. It was George F.G. Stanley, the chairman of the Arts Division and head of the Department of History at RMC, who proposed that the Canadian flag be modeled on the red and white college flag simply by replacing the college symbol, a mailed fist holding 3 green maple leaves on a white background and underscored by the words truth, duty, valor, with a single red maple leaf. Saint-Cyr made the curved stem initially proposed into a straight one and reduced the number of points on the leaf from 13 to 11 to give the symbol a clean, crisp image easily identified from a distance. It should be noted that the 11 points refer neither to the 10 provinces and the territories, nor to anything else other than the shape of the maple leaf and what was considered to be components of the best design. John Ross Matheson summed up the views of the flag in his 1986 book, Canada's Flag, A Search for a Country. Matheson wrote the following:
The struggle for a Canadian flag presents in conflict 2 prime ministers and Canadian statesmen, John George Diefenbaker, steadfast, immovable, courageous, abounding in loyalty and zeal, and Lester Bowles Pearson, a gentle and heroic patriot full of charity and kindness. The real paradox of this tale is that it was John Diefenbaker, whose love for Canada there is no question, who fought against Canada's flag. It was Lester Pearson who philosophically would have pulled down all flags everywhere, who showed his raw love of country by producing the symbol of Canada's yearning to survive.
Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson had this to say about the flag.
On the monument of Montcalm and Wolfe on the heights near the Plains of Abraham are written these words: Valor gave them a common death, history a common fame, posterity a common monument. Mr. Speaker, it is for this generation, for this Parliament, to give them and give us all a common flag, a Canadian flag which, while bringing it together but rising above the landmarks and milestones of the past, will you say profoundly to the world and the future, I stand for Canada.